So welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. The people of Kogi, Imo and Bayelsa states will be looking forward to the result of the governorship elections as they look to elect new people to lead them for the next 4 years. Every contestant will be hoping they've done enough to convince the electorate in these states of their plans to provide good governance. However, the concern of the electoral process will be the major focus. From the conduct of the ad hoc staff and the conduct of the security agencies in ensuring that there is no breakout of violence in each state. As in the past, we've witnessed political thugs disrupting elections in a bid to manipulate results for their favored candidate. Today on the morning show, we will be taking a look at the electoral process, the danger of politicians and political parties' desperation to win at all costs, and the ripple effect on democracy. Joining us to discuss this is Professor Anthony Killer, the Director General, Center for International Advanced and Professional Studies. Prof, it's so good to see you this Sunday morning. I hope you've had your nice cup of tea or coffee to start your day. We're struggling to be sure that we can hear you. Maybe you should.
Oh, really?
Oh, okay, good. So we can hear you. My production team out here will just increase your volume a little bit, but we can hear you now.
Okay.
Oh, excellent. So we can hear you loud and clear now. So that's good. So, Prof, help us understand. We've witnessed a situation where in some states we heard that there was some amount of violence. We've witnessed a situation where in in Imo State, the Labour Party polling collation agent was unhappy with the results that was being announced, and his argument is that the INEC IREV has a different results from what is being collated and announced. But the person who is the collation officer is saying, it's not my job to review anything. Mine is to just announce. I will do my job of announcement. And that takes us to that point where what we usually hear is, let the announcement go ahead. If you're unhappy, go to court. Help us unbundle this in terms of how this affects our democracy. Let's start from there.
Well, good to be here. I am very worried that we are dealing with abnormal issues as if they're normal issues. It's something that is bad, not just for our democracy, but even bad for our psychic. Generally speaking. I would want viewers to very calmly follow me in this conversation and to suspend their partisan position. Because when it comes to issues like this, one of the things that worries me in the country is that partisan politics seems to have taken more from us as a people than it has given us. And it has given us a lot, but overall it has taken a lot from us. And one of the things that partisan politics has taken from us is our mode of reasoning. Because of partisan politics, we're now in a situation in this country where normal, reasonable, even respectable human beings struggle to see wrong and right very easily. Everything is dependent on their political position. Normal, respectable, reasonable citizens can accept what is unacceptable, all in the name of partisan politics. That is a very dangerous trend, not just for democracy, but for progress and for our psychic as a people. Now, we talk about violence, we talk about rigging, we talk about disagreement in the electoral process. Please, dear Nigerians, this is not normal. It is not normal for rigging and violence to be. It is not normal for disagreement to be in a process. You can disagree on who you vote for, but we should not disagree on the process of voting and the number of votes. That is not a normal thing. That is criminal. You see, we treat this thing as if it's some kind of accident, as if it's some kind of mysterious occurrence in nature, but it is not. These are deliberate, mischievous, criminal acts perpetuated by some people to defraud the rest of us. I really think we need to sit down and look at this thing the way they are. And I'm going to deal with this without looking at who's involved politically at all, without looking at any partisan side of the thing. How can any normal human being in a process argue that what is going on is wrong and you say, no, let me finish it. Then you go and contest it later. It doesn't make sense. We should be able to there and then see what is wrong and adjust it and say, hang on a second, what are you talking about? But the problem here is that nobody is talking out of interest or institution, out of passion for truth. Both sides, everybody is talking from an interested partisan side. I think if we really want to get this country forward, we need what I call the ANC, Association of Non-Contenders. We need people who are not interested in any partisan side to relook at what our country needs to do, because this truly is unsustainable.
All right, Professor Killer, you've mentioned, or you've touched on very, very salient issues. But a lot of people that look at electoral jurisprudence will say that the deck is usually stacked against the loser in the election. And the electoral laws, especially the electoral law in 2022, literally puts the loser of the election at the back end, because from all trends, and when you look at the data and the statistics, the man that loses the election rarely gets victory, either in the courts or in the tribunal. So hence, there is so much pressure being put on who will be announced initially, with the hope that if you can get ahead initially, then probably you're almost home and dry when it comes to the entire electoral process. Here's my question. What can be done, before we talk about INEC, first of all, what can be done from the area of the law that it protects the parties, the electorate, and everybody involved in the electoral ecosystem to ensure that it is non-partisan and, more importantly, the will of the people is not subjugated and the will of the people ultimately prevails?
What can be done? I mean, you asked this question and your postulation is right. Yes, the loser tends to be, at the bad side of the game. Yes, you're very right. But you see, the problem we have is that if we find a solution, the people who are supposed to implement the solution are the ones that are causing the problem in the first place. And that is the real tragedy for Nigeria. That is the real damage that we have. Because rigging election, manipulating the system, taking advantage of position is not something that is done by alien or by, some passerby. It's not an accident of nature. We really need to tell ourselves that the people doing politics in Nigeria are crooks. We really need to tell ourselves that the people running for office that want to manipulate election, rig, use violence, they are criminals. They are people prone to dishonesty. If we want to get the system right, that is where we need to start from. Once we agree that, we will now think of ways to say, how do we make sure these crooks do not bend the system? And therein, INEC has to come in. Before them, a whole electoral rethinking has to come. The way to do it is to completely decentralize and digitalize our system in a way that it will become too difficult to control. I think we have a sort of central system in our mind where all the country depend on Abuja, all the states depend on the capital, and there is a central collation and a central announcement. Perhaps that needs to stop. We need to devolve all this thing and decentralize it so that we need to create our life in a way that what matters to us is what happens in our wards. At most, our local government. If possible, let us limit it to our ward. If the number of votes that matters for everybody is what happens just in their polling booth, just in their ward, it becomes more difficult to rig it. It is still possible, but it becomes more difficult. We need to find a way where 50 people vote in a place, and those people, 50 people, count the vote, they see the number, they impute it on a system, and they see that that cannot be changed. And I think those who want to run for office as well, really, they need to understand that either they're criminals themselves as well, or they're running against criminals. And we need to start using this word crook and criminals if we want to get our system right, because this idea of calling people who have rigged the election honorable and excellency, I cringe. Not because I have any problem respecting people, but because I worry about the psychic of our young ones. I worry about our whole system. When people rig yesterday and tomorrow we start calling them excellency and honorable as if nothing happened, that system is not sustainable, I repeat. It is going down the drain. It's a very dangerous system.
Okay, so Prof, when it comes to the issue of violence, it's still ongoing in the country. It's still ongoing when it comes to election. What can possibly be done, if anything, that will take that level of desperation and violence out of our election? Because it's still there. We saw some of it in Kogi. There's some amount of concern about that in Imo and Bayelsa. And when you look at it, people put it down to, we have a culture of having strong men instead of strong institution.
Well, it is partly true, yes, that we have a culture of men over institution, and therein perhaps lies our solution. I think we need to rediscover institution above men. I think we need to rediscover citizenry. And I think we need to reduce the influence of politics. You see, we have, okay, let's break into three sides and get four reasons for where we are. There is an anthropological reason, a cultural anthropological reason, in which really what we practice or what democracy should be is alien to our culture. We need to accept that. There's nothing to be ashamed of. We come from a culture of deference to strong men, deference to money, deference to age, deference to title. So modern democracy, we have a culture of what that I've called barbarism. That is where we're coming from. So we need to understand that is alien to democracy. And democracy is an acquired taste. You know, it's like using cutleries. It's like using the knife and using the right kind of cutleries on the table. We need to learn that. We need to be conscious of our failures and then learn that. Number two, we need to understand that there's something wrong in the system where politics is so important in our life. And I'm going to use an economic example for this. You know, if you look at our life in Nigeria, the aggregate of economy normally is based on consumption, investment, export, and government. We are running a system in which the factor government seems to be the most important. In terms of those who have money, in terms of, you know, who spend, the biggest spender in the country, the biggest factor that manages so much money is government. That needs to change so that we don't get too dependent, too reliant, too desperate to be part of government. And then we need to build, I repeat, build citizenry that will understand that politics is supposed to serve the people, not the people serve politics. I mean, you see, if you think about it, who would fight to serve? Which of your tailor, carpenter, doctor, or optician will bribe you, will fight you to be able to serve you? That should let people open their eyes to see that this thing is not working well. Then we also need to find a way to look at the people who are managing our affairs. I want our viewers to think about anybody they know in politics, from their local government to their House of Reps, and to see what they think of these people personally. You know, I mean, you know, professionally, who are these people in their life? Are they people that they respect for their depth, for their intellect, for their achievement in life? If they know them locally, live in their area, who were they 5-6 years ago? If we put all this together, we see where our problem is. And I think those who care about tomorrow, those who care about Nigeria in any shape or form, should start thinking along that line. And the way, back to your question, is to let citizens rediscover the essence of citizens. And we need to stop being knob. We need to know that Violence and rigging are not normal things in anybody's life. Manipulation, begging, bribing, we should start feeling allergic to them. We can't just treat them as if they're part of the thing. Look, it is not normal to have to go to court after an electoral process. Politicians should be ashamed of themselves. INEC should be ashamed of themselves. It is not a normal thing. Those managing Nigeria should be ashamed of themselves that electoral processes finish in violence and finish in court. That is not the way it ought to be. It's supposed to be a very simple thing amongst gentlemen. It's not supposed to be a thing of do or die. Shame on everybody if we have to be facing this.
All right, Professor Killer, you've mentioned INEC, and I want to take you up on that particular subject and the institution itself. Some would say the cards are always stacked against them, understanding that politicians always invent ways to literally undermine INEC and the process of elections. But talk to me, what do you think can be done to ensure that there is a near perfect process, electoral process here in Nigeria? Because every single time, with issues cropping up here and there, it always seems INEC are always taken unaware, and they always look surprised with the issues that crop up time and time again. We saw that in Imo, we saw that in Kogi, we saw that in Bayelsa State. And we ask, when do we get a strong, vibrant institution that can help midwife this electoral process to a logical and a very solid conclusion?
Well, I think the place to start from is to recognize, and this is not impersonal, but if you want solution, you have to understand the problem, is to truly recognize that INEC, the police, and everybody involved in election have failed. We need to call it out, not so that we can hate them, not so that we can disgrace them. We need to have a very honest, decent, and objective diagnosis to say that so far, the people managing our electoral process have either been complicit or incompetent. For any reason, they have failed. And I'm going to tell you this. Banks have money. Most people wake up in this country and across the world. Most people wake up every day looking for money. If there is one thing people are likely to steal, it is money. It is less books, less food, less gold. Money is the attraction. And yet, the number of bank robberies across the country around you are very little. People just don't rush into the bank to steal money. Much as people would like to steal money, much as people need money. You know what that tells you? That the people managing the banks, the security, the operation, are competent people. That means they are able to be ahead of the urge, the greed, and the propensity for criminality of those who are likely to steal. So that tells you that those managing our election need to learn from those managing banks. They need to understand it is not one kind of impossible case to stay ahead of criminals that want to rig election. We just need to develop the mentality that bankers have developed, and that will save our election. We need to know that once I open a bank or once I handle money, people are going to try to steal it. So what do I need to ensure that they're not able to steal it? We need to get people who can treat our electoral process the way the banks are treating our money. That is where we need to start from.
Okay. Prof, one of the things on my mind is the fact that we say this quite a lot in Nigeria, and it becomes something that worries me. And I'd like to get you to think about it, and maybe you have some suggestions. Is this issue of the so-called power of incumbency? And when we talk about the power of incumbency, it's like we're saying that you can't beat the person who's already won one election before, no matter what happens. I think it was considered as an anomaly when the now former President Buhari won against the former President Jonathan. It was extremely unusual in the history and the annals of Nigerian democracy, even though it was still a fledgling democracy. In the states where we have this election now, in Imo State, there is an incumbent governor, which some people are saying definitely is going to win. In Kogi, for example, there is a governor who's not contesting, but it looks like a lot of people are saying there's no way you will beat him. And I'm like, well, he's not the one on the ballot. But they're saying, well, he's going to install the person who's going to be the next. And then you look at Bielsa. The governor is there. So what we see on a consistent basis is a situation where whether the governor or the president delivers or not, it is assumed that he's definitely going to win the next election. Some people are already saying the current president, he's got 8 years. Forget about whether you're going to vote in 2027 or not. That creates a serious sense of worry about whether we have a democracy or not. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think it goes back to the same thing. It's the same mindset that where democracy is alien to us. We just have to admit this fact. You know, we are deferential people. We believe who sits. We come from a monarchy, at least most of the country. The Yoruba nation of Nigeria and the Arewa part of Nigeria come from a monarchy where we believe, you know, who sits on the throne stays there till he dies. That is something ingrained in us, you know. It is not our way to think that power should be challenged, changed, and criticized and amended as it goes along. That is a problem we have in our mind. But objectively speaking, though, let's be careful. There's been cases in Nigeria where, you know, state governors have lost. I think of Osun, I think of many times in Ekiti, in other parts, you know. So these things do happen. So let's not just look at the one side. An objective analysis will show that there are times when the incumbency, when the power of incumbency is not enough. But the power of incumbency is a very influential power. This takes us to competence. Competence of the electoral body to assure the people that elections are sacred, elections are safe, election can be trusted. That is competence on their part. It also integrity and commitment for them to go on the road. Because, and let me go personal here. If you're going to take on the role of INEC in any position, and you do not think in knowledge and conscience you can handle it, then don't take it. Nobody's going to force you. The moment you take it, you're open to criticism, and you should give it your best. Otherwise, don't take it. Go and look for something else. That is for the electoral body. But competence, again, also for politicians. Much as I cringe and I get angry, and viewers can see today that I'm not a very happy person because of what is going on in the country in this process. It's something that breaks my heart that we'll be talking about election in Nigeria and we'll be talking of violence and rigging as if they're normal things. So it's not a happy day for me. But and this is regardless of who wins, because as a matter of fact, let people know that some of those people who are committing this offense are friends of mine. I hope they win, but I do not like the way they're going about it. I want it to be clear that it's not a partisan position. But you see, the point is this: even politicians themselves, when they go and contest election, much as I feel bad about the system that cheats them and outdoes them, I feel angry towards them as well, because you just need to be 15 years old in Nigeria to understand the process in this country. And if you then put your name on the ballot to contest, as a competent leader, you should be able to foresee all these possibilities, or at least a lot of it. So the idea of coming to say, oh, they've cheated me, I don't know what is happening, is unacceptable. It shows incompetence on the part of politicians as well.
Yeah.
It is good to be idealistic if you're a philosopher or a theologist or a priest.
Yes.
But if you're playing politics, or if you're managing any kind of system, you have to be realistic and pragmatic.
Absolutely.
And you have to be ready for whatever happens.
Absolutely. Prof, just give us a minute. We'll come back to you for more on the elections. We're now being joined by our Rice correspondent, Benga Ashiru, to give us updates from Kogi State. Benga, good morning, and always a joy to see you. I love your sunglasses this morning. It looks like it's a bright and sunny day in Lokoja. So what has happened during the course of the day yesterday? Help us understand, and what's going on right now in Kogi State.
Well, you're very right, Coyote, and thank you, Aaron. It's nice to be with you, and it's indeed a sunny day. If the sun could speak, perhaps I'm waiting to hear the signal if there's an omen from the sun shining so brightly today at Lokoja. But right now, the Arise team is live right in front of the INEC headquarters. You can see the area. It's a watertight security situation in front of INEC, and this is because anytime from now, by 10 o'clock, which is about 46 minutes to the time, the journey of the final journey in this political transition beckons, as they are now, the results from different local governments will be announced at the INEC headquarters here. This area is called Post Office. It's a new settlement in Kogi, just at the right heart of Lokoja. But yesterday it was a mixed fortune to what we thought was a determined narrative to spearhead what would change those past misadventure of an off-cycle and off-season election in Kogi State. The first fly in the ointment was Yaga Africa, who raised the red flag that there was a fake sheet being circulated in Ogori Mangogo. And afterwards, I had to call some of the gatekeepers, the Deputy Inspector General of Police, Mr. Habu Sani, and also the INEC rec on ground, who is in charge, Mr. Gabriel Longpet. And we agreed to meet at Ajakuta, which was 100 kilometers away from Okene. So we got there, and they denied the issue, but it seems INEC is speaking in discordant tune, because we also got a memo that about 9 wards in Ogori Mangogo that has about just 17,000 registered voters the election has been cancelled in that election has been suspended in that area. And also we heard the Social Democratic Party candidates complaining about happenings, especially in the Kogi Central area, which is the home base of the APC candidate, Usman Adodo. He complained about happenings in irregularities in Adavi, Okene, Okei, and Ajakuta. So, and also the People's Democratic candidate, Senator Dino Milaye, has also failed to cast his vote in what he called an exercise that was fraught with irregularities. But right now, it's an anxious moment, as that moment we've been waiting for beckons in less than 43 minutes to the time. You can see the INEC people are trooping in, gatekeepers, different people from different security agencies. You can see them alive, trying to safeguard the entry and scrutinize people who are gaining access into the INEC Collation Center. So for now, that is the moment, but you would understand the novelty and the peculiarity of covering election in a state like Kogi that is arguably one of the biggest in West Africa, about 29,833 square kilometers. And it's so when you behold the undulating hills and the coastline, you would understand why it is so difficult. And considering the strength of the security, the aerial surveillance mounted by the security, determination and the rhetorics that INEC spewed yesterday, it looks more like a political voodoo and a political sophistry, and what I would call an abracadabra to have such an irregularity. It shows that the gatekeepers would have to step up their game in midwifing this political transition, because the prize of a thriving democracy is eternal vigilance. Aaron and Coyote.
All right, Gbenga, I hear you. You mentioned Ogori Magongo and the suspension of 9 wards there in Eni, Okibo, Okesi, Ileteju, Ayoromi, and the rest of them. But my own question to you has to be, what is the word of INEC concerning that? Because if the word there or the driving word right now is suspension, are we still going to have elections held in those 9 wards, or the moment as election be cancelled in Ogori Magongo as it is, and those 9 wards?
I share your sentiments, Aaron. And yesterday I was wondering that would it just stop it looks so much like an anticlimax to just pronounce suspension on those 9 wards out of the 10 wards in Ogori Mangogo, which is at Kogi Central. But the most fundamental issue is the need to instill a culture of impunity. Who are those who, because INEC has failed to mention who are those responsible for these irregularities. And also, the Social Democratic Party mentioned that it was at the IREV point. So we'll be waiting for INEC to come up with a decision, and that's one of the conversations we will be taking up with the INEC rec as the collation begins by 10 a.m. because I spoke with him earlier today, and he assured me that collation exercise would commence by 10 a.m. But regarding what will be done, the next line of action has not, INEC has remained silent on it. And also, who are those really responsible for those irregularities that were fraught in that area? INEC is also still silent on. And what will be done to those people that are found culpable? INEC has also been silent about these issues. So that's the situation for now, but it's a very valid question. We will be taking it up as we commence collation at the INEC headquarters here at Lokoja.
So you just said to us that you're expecting that results will come at 10 o'clock. So we'll be waiting for the immediate announcement of results. So Benga Ashiru, thank you so much for the great work you're doing in Kogi State, and we look forward to wrapping this up during the course of today. Now we're back to our conversation with Professor Anthony Killer, Director General, Commonwealth Institute of Advanced and Professional Studies, here on Arise News. So, Prof, I hope you're still there. Okay, we're trying to get Prof back. So, with what you have heard so far,
it's troubling. I must actually say it's troubling because, more importantly, not even about Benga was focused on the perpetrators being named and shamed. That is very valid. But my own concern is the fact that people from that particular locality have been disenfranchised.
Yeah.
Because if you're suspending elections in that particular region, and you're saying that those people's voice and their mandate or their ability to be able to speak to who becomes the next governor has been truncated. Because according to what we heard, there were pockets of irregularities here and there, like he mentioned, Adavi, Okehi, and also not forgetting Okene local government area. And some places in the south, talking about, they mentioned Dekina at some point, in Galamela. It is unfortunate because what we want to see is the people speak to power as against the courts and even INEC determining who and who not becomes the governor of the state. The people should always be the center of all of this.
Yes, absolutely. So we've got Prof back, Professor Anthony Killer, Director General, Commonwealth Institute of Advanced and Professional Studies. So, Prof, we have to begin to wrap up, but while we're trying to do that, please help us understand. Going forward, there will be more elections. You recall, maybe you did watch, the former president, President Goodluck Jonathan, he did say that we've got to find a solution to this issue of off-cycle elections. I don't know what you think as an expert and great mind in the area of how our democracy go. What do you think about the idea of off-cycle elections? And he actually mentioned that we could have ended up in a situation where there will be off-cycle presidential election as well, which means that the whole thing will happen in a disjointed way. What's your thought?
Well, I think there's nothing, particularly intrinsically good or bad about off-cycle election. I can see the advantages. It keeps political parties on their toes. And I want to explain this. You see, the advantage of it is that if you have off-cycle elections, it makes people in power know that what they are doing will affect their party. So therefore, party members will insist on those who are in office to behave well. because their fortunes at the poll will be affected. And I also think it is good because it allows you not to shut down the whole country, and it is beneficial for small parties because they can focus all their energy on part of the country rather than forced to be to spread out all their resources across the country in general elections. So there's a lot of arguments to be made for off-cycle election, but in itself, it doesn't come with any added advantage or disadvantage. I think where you have an electoral system that works, managed by people of vision, integrity, and competence, it won't matter when elections are held. I hope that one day we have a country where elections are going on and people can get on with their lives normally, where you don't need to close down offices, there'll be no police deployed, it will just be a normal day. And when people are elected into office or they lose their position in office, well, maybe their own extended close families will feel happy or sad, but the rest of the country will just know that, it's a normal job going on. And this is where citizenry comes in. How many of you jubilate when they change, promote, or demote your doctors, and yet the doctors are more important to you? How many people know the name of the headmaster of the primary school near them in their community? And yet those people are the ones that are nurturing your young ones. I think we really need to go and discover what matters to us in life as people. Politics is overrated and we're giving too much attention and interest to it. This is something that the middle class, business leaders, scientists, artists, men of trade, and men and women of thought needs to step up their game to challenge the position politics is holding and let people have diverse interests and diverse avenue for finding fame and fortune. Too much emphasis on politics. It is sad.
All right, Professor Killer, you've just touched on this particular topic. Let's actually stay there, that politics is overrated. But some will say that the biggest business in Nigeria is politics. Everything evolves around politics. Business evolves around politics. Healthcare evolves around politics. Lifestyle evolves around politics, because by the stroke of a pen or by one declaration or by one policy, everything, the landscape here in Nigeria changes, switches, and everyone seems to be zoned into that. Some have spoken to the fact that let's make politics less attractive. Is that the way to go? Or probably having watertight policies that focus more on the people than those in power? How do we balance all of this to ensure that the people get the better stick or better deal in this particular dialogue and in this particular transaction?
Yes, I do agree. I think that we need to make politics like attractive, but more importantly, personally, I think we need to make other spheres of life more attractive. Politics should be less attractive, and other parts of life should be more attractive. I want young Nigerians to think of the Nigerian Science of Academy. I want people to know more about business leaders. I want people to know more about employers of labor. I want people to know more about people who have ideas that innovate, inventors and innovators, people who invest their money, their talent to create things. I want them to know about artists and writers. I would want our interest to go towards people who actually solve problems based on competence and ingenuity. That is what I think is going to help us. If we're able to do that, yes, you say everything revolves around politics. It's because we make it so. It doesn't have to be so. Today, everything revolves around technology, not politics. We're just the one following it. It's because we allow somebody elected for 4 years, if lucky, for 8, to dictate our life, that we assume everything rotates around it. It's not a good thing to say for Nigerians to boycott politics, but I'd like us to divert our interest to other things as well. I want people to think more of job and wealth creation, of scientific innovations, to think of our Greek and what can we do about it. And I want some people, not all, some people to move the way I tend to move, which is to make politics and politicians redundant in our life. To develop the civil society, I repeat, in terms of science, arts, trade, thoughts, so that our interests will be elsewhere and we can see that ultimately politics is just one of the many things. It doesn't have to be the leading thing. Information, knowledge, technology, those are things that matter more than politics.
All right. Professor Anthony Killer, thank you very much for your thought-provoking ideas that you've put on the table and the analysis that you've done this morning. We're always happy to have you on Arise News. Thank you very much, Prof.